That Thursday evening, my sister called. Her voice was dripping with that thick, sickly sweet honey she always used whenever she wanted to extract something from me. But this time, she wasn't asking for a favor. She was gloating. "My high-end lifestyle gallery is having its grand opening tomorrow, Claire. Isn't that just thrilling? Oh, and by the way, I completely drained your credit union account. $115,000. Think of it as your generous, unrefundable investment in my big day. Thanks so much, bye-bye." Before I could even gather my thoughts, the line went dead. I stood there in the kitchen of my Seattle apartment, the phone still pressed tightly against my ear, listening to the absolute silence left in the wake of my sister's voice. $115,000. That was 5 years of meticulous planning, every single year-end bonus, every tax refund, and every dollar I chose not to spend on vacations or nice clothes. Aside from my basic living expenses, my entire life savings had vanished into thin air. And do you want to know what I did next? I laughed. Not a bitter laugh, and not a hysterical cry, but a genuine surprised burst of laughter that echoed off my kitchen walls. Because Chloe had just made the single biggest mistake of her entire life. She thought she was being clever. She thought I would break down, cry, and beg her to return the money. She assumed I would do what I'd done for over 30 years. Swallow the injustice and move on. But Chloe didn't know one vital piece of information. She didn't know that every single vendor, every premium bottle of champagne, and every high-profile influencer invited to her $60,000 dream launch event was about to face absolute cancellation. And I was the only person with the power to pull the plug. I'm glad you're here to listen to this. Please give this video a thumbs up, stick around until the very end, and let me know in the comments which city you're watching from so I can see how far my story travels. My name is Claire Linden, and I am 34 years old. I used to think I understood my family. I work as a senior urban planner at a mid-sized architectural firm in Seattle. I am the kind of woman who audits her bank statements every Sunday morning and tracks her financial goals on spreadsheets. I live alone in a modest one-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill, drive a practical used Subaru, and my only real luxury is a morning pour-over coffee. Every other cent I made went straight into my savings account. It was all funding my dream of opening my own independent architectural design studio. 6 months ago, I found the perfect commercial-zoned brick loft in the Ballard neighborhood. The ground floor was ideal for a studio, and the second floor would be my living space. The listing price was $450,000, and I had finally, after years of sacrifice, saved enough for a solid down payment and initial operating capital. $115,042.18. I knew the number down to the exact penny. Now I stared blankly at the banking app on my phone as the screen verified Chloe's casual announcement. Savings balance, $42.18. 3 massive transfers had occurred over the past week, $40,000, $45,000, and $30,000, all wired into an account belonging to Chloe M. Linden. I set my phone down carefully on the counter, handling it as if it might detonate. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me because I thought I would be trembling. Instead, an icy, intense clarity washed over me. It was the exact same hyperfocus I use when dealing with complicated city zoning codes or navigating strict building permit approvals. Assess, analyze, execute. It was my professional instinct, and it was the only thing I knew how to do in that moment. How did she pull this off? Missing pieces of memory suddenly fell into place. 3 years ago, Chloe had called me sobbing. "Leo is in the hospital in Vancouver, Claire. He has a massive fever and they're running all these tests. I'm terrified, but my cards are frozen because of some cross-border security alert. Can you temporarily add my name as an authorized user on your account? Just for a little bit so I can cover his medical bills." I didn't hesitate for a second back then. Leo is my nephew. He was 8 at the time, and I would have done anything for that boy. That very night, I logged into the Boeing Employees Credit Union portal and added Chloe as an authorized user to my savings. That emergency was supposed to be temporary. As it turned out, it was just a routine viral infection, and Leo was discharged that same afternoon after some children's fever medication. But Chloe never removed herself from the account, and I never thought to check, never thought I needed to revoke her access. Because she was my sister. Because family is supposed to mean trust, and because, as Chloe once texted a friend, I was a total pushover. I had accidentally seen that text 6 months ago. It was during Leo's birthday party. My phone had died, so I borrowed Chloe's to take some pictures of him. A notification popped up from a contact named Samantha. "So, did you get the money from her?" Foolishly, I swiped up to read the thread. "My sister is a total pushover," Chloe's reply burned into my eyes. "She always feels guilty because her career is going better. She thinks being a good sister means being a doormat." I put the phone down back then, finished taking the photos, went home, and quietly removed Chloe from my everyday checking account. But my savings account, the one holding my life's savings, I forgot. One account, one oversight, and that was all it took. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. "Your sister is so incredibly excited about her grand opening tomorrow. Claire, please don't do anything to ruin her mood. After everything she's been through, she deserves this success." I stared at the message. No greeting, no checking in on me, no acknowledging me as an independent human being. I was just a supporting character in Chloe's script. This was an order, a command to stay in my lane, don't stir the pot, and keep playing the role of the mature, responsible, endlessly understanding older sister. But my mother didn't know something, and neither did Chloe. 6 months ago, when Chloe announced she was breaking into the luxury home design industry and started dating a tech executive named Ethan, she asked me for a favor. She wanted to host a launch party that would make waves in Seattle's elite circles. She booked a top-tier art gallery downtown, hired Michelin-level catering, and brought on a premium PR firm. The total budget was $60,000. The problem was Chloe had no money. Her credit cards were maxed out, she had zero savings, and she couldn't keep a job for more than 6 months. So she asked me to co-sign as a commercial guarantor for the venue lease and vendor agreements. "Please, Claire, as soon as the event is over and I secure the investor funding, I'll pay you back immediately. Ethan has serious money in tech. I just need someone with a clean financial record to sign the contracts, so these premium vendors will work with me. You know how these business processes go." Against my better judgment, I agreed. Every single vendor contract, the gallery space, the PR agency, the florists, the high-end catering, the photography team, every single one was guaranteed under my name. Every deposit and final payment required authorization linked to my credit profile. Chloe put my name on everything, telling the vendors I was her silent partner, a generous sister who was backing her completely to make up for years of drift. She had built the entire foundation of her grand dream on top of my signature. And now, she had stolen my life savings, thinking she had stripped me of everything. In reality, she had handed me the master switch to her own financial ruin. I did the math. She stole $115,000 from me. Meanwhile, her $60,000 grand opening relied entirely on my legal and financial backing. Without my authorization, not a single vendor would fulfill their duties. The gallery wouldn't unlock its doors, the PR firm would pull their celebrity guests, and the florists wouldn't set out a single imported rose. I picked up my phone. I didn't call Chloe, I didn't beg, and I didn't demand answers. Instead, I scrolled through my contacts and dialed the number for the credit union's fraud investigation department. It was Thursday night at 8:47 p.m. The grand opening was scheduled for Saturday night at 7 p.m. I had roughly 46 hours. The automated system placed me on hold, transferred me, and made me wait again. Finally, a real person came on the line. "Thank you for calling the fraud department. How can I assist you tonight?" My voice was steady, controlled, and perfectly polite. "I need to report unauthorized transactions on my account, and I need an immediate freeze on all associated payment authorizations, every single one of them." While waiting for confirmation, I looked at a framed photograph on my desk. An 8-year-old me and a 5-year-old Chloe, arms wrapped around each other, both smiling, completely innocent, believing we would always be on the same team. I turned the frame face down on the desk. "I'm sorry, Chloe, you brought this on yourself." As the hold music played softly through the receiver, I sat at my kitchen island with my laptop open, my coffee growing cold. The apartment felt different now, charged with a tension I couldn't quite name. Outside, the Seattle skyline flickered through the drizzle, people going about their normal lives, completely unaware that my world had just shifted its axis. I found myself wondering again, how did we get here? When did my sister become someone capable of this level of betrayal? And when did I become someone who just allowed her to get away with it? To understand any of this, you have to understand the unwritten rules of the Linden household. You have to understand how we were raised. My father, Richard Linden, was an early software QA engineer at Microsoft. He lived by the philosophy that peace at any cost was better than any form of conflict. He spent his career finding bugs in systems and patching them up, and he brought that same energy home. Avoid arguments, smooth things over, and if money can fix a problem, just write the check. My mother, Diane, had been a semi-successful local real estate agent in her youth, but she always felt she belonged in high society, living the life of a wealthy socialite. She never quite got over that resentment, so she poured all her unfulfilled vanity into her youngest daughter. From the moment she was born, Chloe was the center of attention. Blonde, blue-eyed, with a smile that could stop strangers on the street. I was 3 years older than Chloe. I was the quiet one, plain-looking, with an interest in Lego bricks and city maps that far outweighed any desire to play with Barbie dolls. From the very beginning, we were cast in completely different roles within the family dynamic. Chloe was the star on center stage. I was the backstage crew. It was a hierarchy established early on, and it never once wavered. Chloe's bedroom was the large one at the front of the house, featuring massive floor-to-ceiling windows and a walk-in closet. Mine was a converted study in the back, practical, cramped, and labeled cozy by my mother. Chloe's birthday parties were elaborate, heavily choreographed productions with themes, professional catering, and hired photographers. My birthdays were strictly family affairs featuring a Costco sheet cake and a gentle reminder to be grateful for what I had. When I questioned the difference once, my father placed a comforting hand on my shoulder and said, "Claire, you're so mature. You understand that we have to make trade-offs. Chloe needs a little extra care and attention, but you've always been our strong one." I learned exactly what strong meant when I was 12. Chloe wanted to attend an incredibly expensive private art camp that included a summer tour of Europe. I wanted a high-performance computer to run my very first architectural design software, which cost just over $1,000. The family budget could only support one. My father sat me down, using that same reassuring touch and an apologetic smile. "Claire, you understand, right? Chloe has this beautiful artistic gift, and this is crucial for her future. You're so responsible you can easily find a summer job to get what you need, can't you?" I nodded. I always nodded. Chloe went to Europe, and I went to work at a local coffee shop. I learned a bitter lesson that summer. Being responsible meant being overlooked. The summer I turned 19, an overheard conversation solidified this reality forever. My mother was on the phone with my aunt in the kitchen, and I froze in the hallway, unable to move. "Claire will be fine," my mother said, her voice carrying a dismissive wave I knew all too well. "She's the resilient one. Chloe is the one who needs our backing. She's just so sensitive and fragile." Standing in that hallway, it clicked. Being resilient didn't mean I was admired. It meant I was built to handle neglect. It meant they didn't have to worry about me. It meant I was invisible. Chloe's life followed a highly predictable pattern. She was the high school homecoming queen, dated the football captain, and posed in designer dresses at charity galas for local magazines. I was the straight-A student, the debate team captain, and the girl working part-time at a bookstore to save for college. At my University of Washington graduation dinner, my mother spent the entire evening talking about Chloe's wealthy new boyfriend. When Chloe was 22, she totaled her car in a reckless driving incident. Thankfully, no one was hurt, but the vehicle was completely destroyed. My father replaced it for her within a month, claiming she had learned her lesson. Meanwhile, at 25, I was still taking the public bus every single day to my internship at the architecture firm. When Chloe dropped out of design school because the professors didn't appreciate her aesthetic, my parents nodded sympathetically and welcomed her back home. When I earned my master's degree in architecture with top honors, my mother asked if I could help cover Chloe's credit card debt. Chloe's first marriage happened when she was 28. His name was David, a kind, mild-mannered man who owned a well-reviewed little bistro in Capitol Hill. He absolutely adored her. They met at a wine tasting, were engaged within 4 months, and married within 8. I was the maid of honor. When the wedding budget went $20,000 over, I quietly paid the difference. "It's for family," I told myself. That's what family does. The marriage lasted exactly 3 years. By the end of it, David looked like a man completely hollowed out from the inside. 6 months after the wedding, Chloe quit her job as a gallery receptionist to focus on being a restaurateur's wife. In reality, that meant endless shopping sprees, spa days, and what she called networking to elevate the bistro's profile. David's credit cards maxed out one after another. When their son Leo was born, I hoped motherhood would ground her. Instead, Chloe hired a full-time nanny and kept spending. David filed for divorce after discovering Chloe had hidden $60,000 in secret debt from him. His bistro's cash flow collapsed, forcing him to close the doors permanently. But Chloe moved faster. She spun a narrative of financial control and emotional distress to our parents, claiming David monitored her every move and hid the restaurant's true earnings. And they believed her. They always believed her. I paid for Chloe's divorce lawyer. When she moved out, I covered the security deposit on her luxury apartment. When Chloe claimed she was struggling, I bought Leo's clothes and school supplies. Over 2 years, that assistance added up to roughly $30,000. She's my sister, I rationalized. She's Leo's mother. What choice do I have? The false emergency regarding the Canadian hospital happened 3 years ago, and Chloe simply never revoked her access to my savings. I trusted her. She was family. Later, I discovered she had actually been making small, sporadic withdrawals the entire time. 300 here, 500 there, always just below the threshold that would trigger a major bank alert. Over 3 years, it totaled about $10,000. I noticed it eventually, but I said nothing. Confronting family felt far more painful than losing the money. I didn't want to seem petty. After everything, I was still trying to be the strong one. That only changed 6 months ago when I saw that text message on her phone. Pushover, doormat, useful. That very night, I removed her from my checking account. But the savings account holding the down payment for my Ballard studio loft slipped my mind. One single oversight, one incomplete task, and my sister stole my entire future. The hold music on the line suddenly cut out. "Ms. Linden, thank you for waiting." I sat up straight in my chair. "Yes, I'm here. We have successfully placed a hold on the savings account per your request. The connected commercial merchant accounts have also been locked pending an internal review." I expected to feel a massive wave of relief. Instead, I felt a cold, focused rush of anticipation. All automated processing scheduled for the next 72 hours has been halted. Then, the representative delivered a piece of information that made my blood run cold. "Ms. Linden, there is something else you should be aware of. While reviewing the transaction patterns for the fraud report, we noticed an anomaly. The first large withdrawal from your account occurred exactly 1 week ago. That same day, your sister was added to a joint account with an individual named Ethan Blake. It appears she gained access to his funds on the exact same day she initiated the transfers from yours." I sat in absolute silence. She wasn't just taking my money, she was systematically draining her tech executive boyfriend's accounts as well. And nobody had any idea. Except me. I didn't sleep a single wink that night. By the time Friday morning rolled around, I had been awake for nearly 24 hours, fueled entirely by black coffee and something far sharper than caffeine. Call it determination, or perhaps a lifetime of repressed anger finally demanding to be heard. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop wide open, papers scattered across every available surface. The credit union's fraud confirmation email blinked on the screen. Outside, Seattle was waking up just like any other Friday morning. Commuters rushing to work, people lining up for espresso, everyone going about their ordinary lives. For them, nothing had changed. For me, everything had shifted. The clock on my laptop read 6 a.m. The grand opening was scheduled for tomorrow night at 7 p.m. I had exactly 37 hours to decide who I wanted to be. Was I going to be the sister who forgives and forgets, swallows the loss, and maintains the peace at any cost? Or was I finally going to be the woman who stands up for herself? I picked up my phone and dialed Olivia Chen. Olivia and I had been roommates at the University of Washington, and we'd stayed incredibly close ever since. Today, she was a high-stakes commercial litigator at a top firm downtown, the kind of woman who wore sharp designer suits like armor and could dismantle an opposing counsel's argument with surgical precision. She was also the only person in my life who had despised Chloe from the very moment they met. "She is a parasite, Claire," Olivia had told me years ago. "I honestly don't know how you can't see it." Back then I chose not to see it, now I had no choice. The phone rang twice before a raspy early morning voice answered. "Claire, it is 7 a.m. on a Friday. Someone better be dead." A small laugh escaped my throat. "Nobody is dead, but if you don't help me I might actually commit a crime." There was a sharp pause on the other end. Instantly, Olivia's voice shifted into complete clarity. "I'm listening." I laid out everything for her. Chloe's phone call, the missing $115,000, the frozen merchant accounts, the grand opening that was entirely dependent on my signature, and the banking details regarding Ethan's accounts. When I finished, the line went dead silent for a long moment. "She did what?" Olivia asked, her voice completely flat with disbelief. "And there's more," I added. "I think she's running the exact same play on her fiancé." Another 3 seconds of heavy silence passed before Olivia spoke. "I'm coming over. Do absolutely nothing until I get there. And for the love of God, put on another pot of coffee." Olivia arrived by 8:30 a.m., looking perfectly polished despite the early hour. She walked in carrying a briefcase and a legal notepad, and before she even sat down, her eyes were already scanning the financial documents spread across my counter. "All right," she said, transforming my kitchen into a makeshift war room. "Walk me through this from the absolute beginning. Don't leave out a single detail." I did exactly that. I laid out every document, every transfer record, and every discrepancy I had uncovered during my sleepless night. Olivia didn't interrupt. She just took notes in her precise, disciplined handwriting, her expression hardening with every disclosure. When I finally finished, she set her pen down and looked straight at me. "Being an authorized user does not mean having authorization to pillage an account," she said. She had technical access, but she never had permission to take $115,000. That is theft. Given the amount, it's grand larceny, which carries severe legal weight. If she misrepresented any intentions to access those funds, it could cross into wire fraud. "What about the opening gala?" I asked. "The vendors?" Olivia pulled my vendor contracts toward her, scanning each page with professional efficiency. "You signed all of these as the primary guarantor. You aren't just a payer, you are the core of the contract." Her eyes met mine. "Without your authorization, these vendors cannot legally proceed. You are fully within your rights to halt every single remaining payment." Her words felt like armor. I had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed by a seasoned litigator made it real. Chloe had built her lavish career launch on top of my signature, and all it would take was a few phone calls to bring it all down. "Olivia," I said slowly, "if I freeze everything, her grand opening completely collapses. My parents will blame me for all of it." Olivia's expression softened just a fraction. "They're going to blame you regardless, Claire. They always do. So let's make sure that when they do, you are completely protected by the law." Over the next hour, we mapped out our strategy. Step 1 was to verify that every single vendor contract was tied exclusively to my name. Step 2 was to issue formal legal notices to each vendor, withdrawing my financial backing and stopping all payments. Step 3 was to document every communication for potential civil and criminal proceedings. And Step 4 was deciding whether to contact Ethan. That last part was the hardest. He's about to enter a business partnership and potentially marry a woman who is actively draining his accounts, Olivia pointed out. Doesn't he deserve to know the truth? I hesitated. I've barely met him. For all I know, he could be complicit. Olivia shook her head. Or he's just another victim, exactly like you. I thought about David, Chloe's ex-husband, the man she had painted as a financial monster when the reality was completely the opposite. He had been entirely in the dark until it was far too late. By then, his credit was ruined, his bistro was gone, his reputation was shattered, and his custody of Leo was reduced to weekends. If someone had warned him, things might have been different. I'll freeze the gala arrangements first, I decided. If Ethan reaches out to me, I'll tell him the truth. But I won't go looking for him right now. I have enough on my plate. Olivia nodded. Fair enough, let's get to work. At 9 a.m., the calls to the vendors began. The first was to the Lumiere Art Gallery downtown. The phone rang twice before a receptionist answered. Good morning, Lumiere Gallery. This is Victoria speaking. How can I help you? I took a deep breath. My name is Claire Linden. I am the commercial guarantor for Chloe Linden's brand launch scheduled for tomorrow night. I need to verify the payment status and discuss the contract terms. Victoria's tone turned instantly warm. Oh yes, Ms. Linden. Your sister speaks so highly of you. She keeps telling us how incredibly generous you are. My stomach tightened. Does she? What exactly did she say? Well, Victoria continued brightly, she called you her angel investor. She mentioned you insisted on funding this entire launch as a gift because you felt guilty about, I believe she said, not being supportive enough during her difficult divorce. I closed my eyes, letting the full weight of Chloe's deception wash over me. She hadn't just stolen my money, she had crafted an entire narrative to justify it. In her story, I was the guilt-ridden, absent sister trying desperately to make amends. She had made me an unwitting accomplice in my own robbery. That narrative is inaccurate, I said, keeping my voice perfectly even. I am issuing a stop payment order on all remaining balances. Furthermore, I am formally withdrawing my commercial guarantee for this event. Do not proceed with any setup until you receive formal documentation from my attorney. The line went completely dead for a few seconds. Ms. Linden, the gala is tomorrow. I am well aware. The exact same pattern repeated with every single call. Emerald City Premium Catering had an $18,000 contract, with $8,000 still outstanding. Your sister said you offered to pay the balance because you were too busy with work to attend in person, the manager told me. She said you felt you'd neglected the family because of your career success and wanted to contribute this way. I had never said anything of the sort. I issued the stop payment order. The floral atelier had a contract totaling $8,500. Your sister was so incredibly grateful to you, the florist shared. She told me you two were finally reconciling after years of estrangement. We had never been estranged, and we had never reconciled, mostly because there was nothing to reconcile from, at least nothing Chloe would ever take responsibility for. I froze the remaining $4,500. By noon, I had contacted every single vendor on the list. The PR firm, the photography team, the hair and makeup stylists, the luxury car service. Every single business had a different story, a unique version of why Claire Linden was so generously funding her sister's venture. In one version, I was making up for missing her first wedding. In another, I was a wealthy tech mogul spoiling my younger sister. In another, I was the family's unofficial financial planner who insisted on controlling all the details. Not a single story was true, but they all painted the exact same picture. Chloe had constructed a fantasy world where she was the adored star, and I was the supporting character willing to pay any price for her approval. She had weaponized my sense of responsibility against me. Olivia organized her notes from the calls. She didn't just steal your money, Claire, she said coldly. She stole your reputation. She framed you as a neglectful villain in a story where you are actually the victim. I stared at the vendor list, looking at the massive figures and the intricate web of lies my sister had spun. She's done this her entire life, I said, always casting herself as the tragic heroine. Olivia set her jaw. Well, the show is over. By 4 p.m., formal legal notices had been delivered to every vendor. The Lumiere Gallery would not open its doors. Emerald City Catering would not prepare a single plate. The Floral Atelier would not deliver a single bloom. The PR firm canceled all celebrity and influencer invitations. Tomorrow night, 150 of Seattle's elite would arrive in their finest attire, only to find an empty, locked building. Chloe's $60,000 dream launch was frozen solid, and she still had absolutely no idea. Olivia ordered takeout and forced me to eat. You did the right thing, she said. I chewed on food that tasted like cardboard. Then why do I feel like I just detonated a bomb? Because you did, Olivia replied, but she's the one who built the device. You just triggered the mechanism. My phone remained quiet for most of the evening. No calls from Chloe, no texts from my parents. Chloe likely assumed I was hiding in a corner somewhere, devastated by her betrayal, too weak to fight back. She was about to find out exactly how wrong she was. At 8:47 p.m., my phone finally rang. Chloe's name flashed across the screen. Olivia and I stared at it simultaneously. She knows, Olivia said. I answered the call but didn't say a word. I just waited. Then came my sister's voice. The sweet, triumphant tone was entirely gone. Her voice was trembling, sharp, and filled with pure panic. What did you do? I stayed silent. Her voice rose to a scream. What did you do? The gallery called. The caterers called. The PR firm called. They're saying the payments are frozen. They're saying you withdrew the guarantee. I let the silence stretch for one more second before I spoke, my voice calm, controlled, and perfectly polite. You took $115,000 from me, Chloe. Did you honestly think there wouldn't be consequences? The line went completely dead. When Chloe spoke again, her voice had shifted. The panic was gone, replaced by something cold and venomous. You have no idea what you've just started. On Saturday morning, I woke up to rare Seattle winter sunshine streaming through the window. For a brief, disorienting second, I forgot what day it was. Then reality rushed back, and I remembered everything. Today was my sister's grand opening, the grand opening that no longer existed. Olivia was asleep in the armchair across from me, her laptop still balanced on her knees. We had both drifted off after midnight, completely exhausted from the mental strain. I reached for my phone on the coffee table, and my stomach instantly tightened. 19 missed calls from Chloe. 8 from my mother. 5 from numbers I didn't recognize. There was a flood of text messages, each one escalating in desperation. Chloe at 2 a.m. Call me back right now. Chloe at 3 a.m. I swear to God, Claire, if you don't fix this. Chloe at 5 a.m. You are making the biggest mistake of your life. My mother at 6 a.m. What on earth have you done? Call me immediately. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from an unrecognized Seattle number. Ms. Linden, this is Victoria from the Lumiere Gallery. Chloe is here and she is incredibly emotional. She keeps insisting this is all a massive misunderstanding. Please advise. I texted back immediately. There is no misunderstanding. The stop payment and cancellation orders stand. Please direct all further communication to my attorney. I attached Olivia's contact info and put my phone on silent. I had said everything that needed to be said. Now, all I could do was wait. Olivia woke up around 10, blinking against the morning light. She caught my expression and immediately sat up straight. Did something happen? Not yet, I replied, but it's coming. By 3:30 that afternoon, my phone had turned into a literal chronicle of a disaster. Messages were flooding in from friends of friends, distant relatives, and people ICNC barely even knew who had somehow managed to get my number. Did you hear about Chloe's grand opening? It's completely canceled. The gallery doors are locked, the PR firm pulled out, everything is gone. The street is packed with guests in formal gowns, freezing in the wind with nowhere to go. One text included a photo. It was a grainy, distant shot of a bewildered crowd gathered on the sidewalk outside the Lumiere Gallery. Right in the middle of everyone was a bright flash of red. It was Chloe, standing in her expensive dress, gesturing frantically to someone in desperation. Then a text arrived that sent a cold shiver down my spine. It was from Ethan, Chloe's fiancé and business partner, the tech executive I had Jingli barely met. His message was short, filled with confusion. Are you Claire Linden? This is Ethan Blake, Chloe's fiancé, or at least I was until this morning. I need to know what's going on. Chloe claims you're deliberately sabotaging her career out of jealousy, but things aren't adding up. The vendors keep saying you are the financial guarantor, but Chloe told me she was paying for this using $80,000 of her own savings. I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. Chloe has no savings. She has $40,000 in credit card debt. Just this week, she took $115,000 from my credit union account to pay for this gala and her setup expenses. I'm incredibly sorry you have to find out this way. The reply came almost instantly. I think I need to hear the whole story. Before I could type a response, the phone rang. It wasn't Ethan. It was my mother. I let it ring 3 times, taking a deep breath to mentally prepare myself before answering. How could you do this to your own sister? My mother's voice was sharp enough to cut. On the day of her grand opening, Claire, the most important day of her life. I kept my voice perfectly level. Did Chloe mention what she did? Did she tell you she took $115,000 from me? My mother didn't hesitate for a single second. That is between the two of you. You didn't have to ruin her career over a financial dispute. A financial dispute? I repeated, my composure cracking for the very first time. She stole my entire life savings. The money I spent years accumulating to build my own architecture studio. That is not a family disagreement, Mother. That is a major legal offense. Family members do not involve authorities and escalate things, my mother snapped. You go and fix this, Claire. I don't care what it takes. You go fix this right now. I thought about every single thing I had ever fixed, every check I had written, every loss I had absorbed, every piece of drama I had smoothed over just to keep the peace. I thought about giving up my computer when I was 12 and waiting for the bus at 16 while Chloe drove a brand new car. I thought about paying for a lavish wedding that wasn't mine, and covering the bills for a divorce that wasn't mine. Always paying, always compromising, while everyone constantly reminded me that I was the strong one, the one who could handle it, the one who would understand. I am not fixing anything, I said. Chloe created this situation herself. She can face the consequences. Then you are no longer my daughter. The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly. My hands were shaking, but it wasn't from sorrow. It was a sensation that felt almost exactly like freedom. Olivia looked at me from across the room. Your mom? I nodded. I think I was just written out of the family. The phone buzzed again, this time with an unfamiliar area code. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Is this Claire, Chloe's sister? This is David, her ex-husband. I heard what happened. Word travels fast. I just wanted to say thank you and to tell you to be careful. I stared at the screen. David. The man Chloe had completely dismantled with accusations and lies. The man who had lost his reputation, his credit, his restaurant, and even shared custody of his son, simply because he dared to question where their money was going. His next message popped up. She did the exact same thing to me, word for word. Drained the accounts, blamed me for everything, and painted me as the villain. I lost my career, my financial standing, and my right to see my child normally. Nobody believed me. Her family certainly didn't. Then another text. She is going to try every tactic in the book now. Tears, threats, family pressure. She will try to make you feel like you're the monster. Don't fall for it. You aren't the problem, she is. As I was processing David's words, a heavy pounding erupted at my front door. It wasn't a normal knock. It was a violent assault on the wood, so aggressive the entire doorframe rattled. Olivia jumped to her feet. Don't open it. But I was already walking toward the peephole. A part of me had known exactly what I would see. There she was, Chloe, still wearing that expensive red gown, though it was now wrinkled, stained with street dust, and marked with dark streaks of mascara-laced tears. Her hair was falling apart, clinging wildly to her face. Her eyes burned with something far beyond anger. It was a look of pure desperation. I unlocked the door and opened it. For a long, heavy moment, we just stared at each other. Two sisters separated by 34 years of dysfunction, and a threshold neither of us wanted to cross. Then Chloe's voice broke through, raw, cracking, barely sounding human. You ruined my life. The words echoed down the apartment hallway. I could see neighboring doors opening a crack, curious faces peering out to watch the spectacle. My sister standing there in her ruined dress, screaming at me as if I were the betrayer. I stood completely straight, looking at this stranger in red, this woman who shared my blood but had never shared my values. Calmly, with a firmness I didn't even know I possessed, I spoke. No, Chloe, you ruined your own life. I just stopped paying for it. Her face twisted with rage. She took a step forward, and for the first time in my entire life, I didn't back down. Chloe stood in my doorway, her gown covered in stains, her makeup streaking dark tracks down her cheeks. Behind me, I could hear Olivia moving around. Her phone was already out, recording everything. Smart lawyer, we were definitely going to need a record of whatever happened next. You have no idea what you've done. Chloe's voice tore between screams and sobs. 150 people. The editor-in-chief of Seattle's biggest design magazine was right there. They all saw it. They all know. Ethan's investment partners flew in all the way from San Francisco, and everyone was staring at me like I was a fraud. I stood in the doorway, blocking her path into my apartment. You need to lower your voice. You're disturbing my neighbors. But my calm demeanor only seemed to infuriate her more. Chloe's hands clenched into tight fists at her sides, her breathing heavy and ragged. For a split second, I thought she might actually lash out. Then, the expression on her face shifted. I watched it happen in real time. The rage flickered, calculated, and adapted. She was used to using anger to get what she wanted. When that failed, she had other tools. Her shoulders dropped, and her face transformed from pure fury into deep, profound sorrow. The tears that had been born of anger turned into something entirely different, dramatic and deeply wounded. How could you do this to me, Claire? She used the childhood nickname she hadn't called me in years. Her voice dropped low, becoming soft and vulnerable. I'm your sister, your only sister. I know I'm not perfect. I know I've made mistakes. But I was finally on the verge of succeeding. I was finally going to have a career that was truly my own. And you took it away from me on the most important day of my life. She reached out to grab my hand, but I took a step back. Don't you remember how close we used to be? Sharing a room when we were kids, telling each other secrets? What happened to us? I almost laughed out loud. What happened to us? 34 years of your endless taking and my textbook giving. But I didn't say it. I just watched her perform, recognizing every single beat of the script she had been running since childhood. The tears, the memories, the appeal to blood relations. She had used this exact same strategy on our parents, on David, and on anyone who ever tried to hold her accountable. And it had always worked, until today. When she realized I wasn't softening, the performance shifted once more. Chloe straightened up, wiping away her tears with an exaggerated gesture, and tried a completely different angle. "After everything I've done for you," she said, her voice instantly taking on a tone of self-righteous entitlement. "Who was there for you when Mom and Dad favored you in everything? Who stood up for you when the kids at school called you a boring nerd? Who brought you into my social circle when you didn't have a single friend at UW? I made you who you are today, Claire, and this is how you repay me?" The lies were so incredibly bold, so completely detached from reality, that I almost had to admire her nerve. Mom and Dad favoring me? I was the one who waited for the bus while she drove a brand new car. I was the one living in a cramped back room, eating discount grocery store cake, and working 3 jobs just to survive because every spare cent went toward funding her endless dead-end dreams. But in Chloe's version of history, she was always the victim, always the one making the sacrifices. "It's not like you were going to use that money anytime soon anyway." The words slipped out of her mouth before she could stop herself. I froze. "What did you say?" Chloe's eyes flickered, realizing her mistake, but she decided to double down. "I mean, it's not like you have any big events coming up. You don't even have a boyfriend, let alone a wedding or a family to plan for. Your little studio project can always wait. That money was just sitting there doing nothing, and I needed it. I needed it more than you do." Olivia's cold, precise voice cut in from behind me. "Did you catch that on camera?" She held up her phone, the lens pointed straight at Chloe. Chloe's face turned absolutely pale. Behind her, the elevator chimed, and I heard a familiar set of footsteps echoing down the hallway. Before I even saw them, my stomach dropped. My mother and father were striding down the corridor, looking like reinforcements arriving at a battlefield. They had clearly driven straight over after receiving Chloe's frantic distress call. My father looked exhausted and deeply uncomfortable, his default state. My mother looked ready for war. "Have you caused enough trouble?" My mother's voice pierced through the hallway. She marched straight past me to Chloe, throwing an arm around her while directing a venomous glare in my direction. "Look at her. Look at what you've done to your sister." I stepped back, allowing them into the apartment. Not because I wanted them there, but because my neighbors were still peering out from behind their doors. Whatever was about to happen next didn't need an audience. They took their positions in my living room like a formal court. Chloe collapsed dramatically onto my sofa, my mother sitting right beside her, stroking her hair as if she were a casualty of war. My father paced restlessly near the window, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. Olivia stood by the front door, her phone still recording, observing everything with the sharp attention of an attorney building a case. "I raised you better than this, Claire," my mother said, her voice dropping to a freezing register. "Family is everything, everything. No matter what Chloe did, you handle it privately. You never humiliate her in public. Do you have any idea what people in our circles are saying about our family right now?" I looked at my mother. This woman who had spent nearly 40 years using me as the family's emotional shock absorber. I felt something deep inside me turn completely to stone. "Chloe stole $115,000 from me. That isn't a misunderstanding. That is grand larceny." My father let out a soft sound, somewhere between a cough and a sigh. Everyone turned to look at him. He stood by the window, his shoulders hunched, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. "Let it go, Claire," he muttered. "I'll find a way to pay you back for it." My mother's head snapped toward him. "Richard?" But my father kept going, his voice faint and barely audible. "She's right, Diane. Chloe took the money. I saw the bank alerts on Claire's account. I helped her set them up years ago, and the notification emails still copied in my inbox. I knew about it the day the transfers happened." An absolute crushing silence filled the room. "You knew?" My mother's voice shifted, her fury instantly redirecting toward her husband. "You knew, and you didn't tell me?" My father shrank further into his shell. "She begged me not to say anything. She said she'd pay it back the moment she secured investors at the grand opening. She promised everything would be handled." I stared at my father. I finally understood that his silence wasn't just cowardice. It was complicity. He had stood by and watched Chloe drain my future without saying a word. He received those alerts, watched the money vanish from my account, and chose to protect his favored child instead of his responsible daughter, just like he had always done. My mother turned back to face me, but something in her expression had fundamentally shifted. She was still angry, but the anger was now mixed with confusion. It was the first real crack in the fortress she had built to defend Chloe's actions. Chloe's phone rang, cutting through the heavy air. She answered it immediately and pressed the speakerphone button. A small, frightened, and confused voice came through the line. "Mom, when are you coming home? Why was the party canceled? Did I do something wrong?" Leo. Hearing my nephew's voice made a physical knot tighten in my chest. Chloe's eyes locked onto mine, and even through her tears, I saw the cold calculation return. "No, sweetie," Chloe soothed softly. "Mom is just talking to Auntie Claire. She made a mistake, but Mom is going to fix it." Then, with deliberate cruelty, she added, "Sweetie, tell Auntie Claire you love her." Leo's innocent voice came through. "I love you, Auntie Claire. Please don't be mad at Mom." Chloe disconnected the call, keeping her gaze pinned to mine. "He loves you so much. He wanted you at his birthday party next month. Are you really going to put his mother in legal jeopardy over some money? What kind of aunt are you?" Olivia stepped forward, her voice cutting like glass. "That's enough. Using your own child for emotional extortion is a new low, even for you." Chloe's head snapped toward her. "Stay out of this. This is a family matter." Olivia didn't even blink. "I am Claire's family, the kind that doesn't steal from her." I walked over to the front door and held it wide open. "Everyone, get out!" My mother began to protest. "Now see here." I turned my full attention to Chloe. "You have 72 hours. Return every single dollar you took, the full $115,000, and sign a formal legal admission of what you did. Do that, and we handle this quietly. No authorities, no courts. Refuse, and I am filing formal criminal charges on Monday morning." My mother's voice dropped to a terrified whisper. "You would actually do that to your own sister?" I looked at Chloe. "She did this to herself. I'm just the one stopping the cycle." They slowly filed out of the apartment. My mother supported Chloe as if she were a wounded soldier, while my father followed behind, completely unable to look me in the eye. But at the threshold, Chloe stopped and turned her head. Her expression had changed completely. The tears were gone, the panic was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating mask. She stepped closer, leaning in to whisper in a voice meant only for me. "You think you've won? You think canceling my opening night is the end of this? I know things about you, Claire. Things that could cost you your professional license. 72 hours? Perfect. Use that time to think very carefully about who you're crossing." She turned and walked away, the train of her expensive custom dress dragging along the rough concrete of the hallway. I closed the door and leaned against it, suddenly feeling completely drained. Olivia was watching me with intense alert. "What did she say to you?" I closed my eyes. "She threatened my career." My stomach wrenched as I realized exactly what she was referencing. 6 months ago, while I was preparing the business plan for my independent studio, Chloe had borrowed my laptop. Saved on it was an internal memo regarding a structural code discrepancy I had discovered on a major downtown commercial complex project my current firm was handling. I had found the error, reported it immediately, and the firm resolved it legally and safely. But during a rare moment of vulnerability, I had confided in Chloe about how stressful that initial discovery had been. And now, she was planning to weaponize it against me. Every secret, every moment of vulnerability, and every confidence I had ever shared with my sister had been transformed into ammunition. Sunday morning arrived with a heavy gray sky and the promise of rain. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and my coffee untouched, watching the clock count down the hours of Chloe's ultimatum. 64 hours remaining. In 64 hours, we would either receive the funds or I would take my own sister to court. In my heart, I already knew which outcome was more likely. Chloe's quiet threat kept echoing in my mind. That commercial project memo was a textbook example of proper compliance. I found a problem, reported it, and it was fixed. But Chloe had a rare gift for twisting completely innocent facts into a damaging weapon. If I was going to see this through, I needed to fully understand what I was up against. What else had Chloe done? Who else had she crossed? How deep did this pattern actually go? At 9:15 a.m., my phone rang. The caller ID displayed a local Seattle number I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously. "Claire, it's David. We texted yesterday. I need to talk to you. I need to tell you everything." I set my coffee down. "I'm listening." His voice was steady, but it carried the immense weight of years of accumulated exhaustion. "We met at a friend's wine tasting. She was magnetic, beautiful. She had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room who mattered. We were engaged in 4 months, married in 8. I truly believed I'd found my soulmate. David paused, a heavy sigh traveling over the line. The first sign was small, a $2,000 withdrawal from our joint account that I hadn't authorized. When I confronted her, she broke down in tears, saying she'd meant to tell me that her car needed urgent repairs, and she'd been too embarrassed to ask for the money. I believed her. I loved her. Then came another withdrawal, followed by another. David explained that over the next 2 years, nearly $40,000 systematically vanished from their accounts. Every single time David questioned a line item, Chloe was armed with an explanation. An emergency for Leo, a close friend in financial distress, or investing in her wardrobe to properly represent the bistro. Each time she wept, apologized, and promised it would never happen again. Until the next time. When I finally put my foot down and demanded we see a financial counselor, she completely shifted her tactics, David continued. Suddenly, I wasn't the concerned husband anymore. I was a controlling, financially abusive monster. She started telling our mutual friends that I monitored her every move, kept her on a strict childhood allowance, and that she was terrified of my temper. I closed my eyes, recognizing the exact beats of the script. It was the identical play she was running on me. By the time I discovered she had concealed $60,000 in credit card debt and filed for divorce, she was already 3 steps ahead of me. David's voice cracked slightly. She had spent months setting up the narrative. Her lawyer painted me as a monster. She brought in character witnesses, friends she'd been feeding lies to for years. All I had were bank statements. And do you know what the judge saw? A frightened, sympathetic woman and a bitter man making clinical financial accusations. She had tears. I just had spreadsheets. The tears won. David took a deep breath. I lost primary custody of Leo. The court gave her the majority of his time because she seemed like the vulnerable party who needed protection. It took me 3 years to rebuild my credit and my life, and I still only get to see my son on weekends. She stripped me of everything, Claire, everything, all because I asked where our money went. I thanked David and promised to stay in touch. The moment the call ended, I dialed Olivia. By noon, Olivia had brought me into a high-end conference room at her firm. She had looped in one of the firm's senior partners specializing in white-collar financial fraud, Daniel Harris. Daniel was a silver-haired man in his late 50s with a piercing gaze and a reputation for being absolutely ruthless in the courtroom. I laid out the entire paper trail on the conference table. Bank statements, wire transfers, vendor agreements, and the recording of Chloe's tirade outside my door. Daniel reviewed each document methodically, taking notes in a disciplined hand. When he finally looked up, his expression was incredibly grave. "This is a clear-cut case of grand larceny and wire fraud," Daniel stated. "Authorized access as an emergency contact does not grant a legal license to clean out an account. Forging business guarantee documents constitutes explicit fraud. Combined with this evidence of premeditation, his investigator, Kevin, entered the room with the preliminary digital forensics. We tracked the access logs for your credit union account, Ms. Linden. Your sister attempted to log into the portal 5 separate times over the past 2 months. The first 4 attempts failed. She only succeeded on the 5th. She was systematically testing your security, waiting for the right moment." He looked directly at me. "This wasn't an impulse crime, this was an ambush." The flow of the funds was equally damning. Daniel's team traced exactly where my $115,000 had gone. $45,000 had paid off the immediate venue and catering balances. $40,000 went directly to clearing Chloe's hidden personal credit card debt. $15,000 was transferred into her joint account with Ethan, and $15,000 had been withdrawn as cold cash. "She used your money to wash her own financial slate clean," Daniel explained, erasing her past liabilities, capital funding her new partnership, and keeping a cash reserve. She is literally building her brand new life on top of your life savings. Later that afternoon, I met Ethan Blake at a quiet cafe in Capitol Hill. He looked entirely different from the polished tech executive I had briefly met before. He was exhausted, his clothes were noticeably wrinkled, and deep dark circles weighed under his eyes. It was obvious he hadn't slept since the gala collapsed the previous night. We sat in a secluded corner booth, 2 strangers who had been targeted by the exact same predator. "After we exchanged messages yesterday, I audited my accounts," Ethan said, staring blankly into his untouched coffee. "You were completely right. There were dozens of small, irregular withdrawals over the last month. 200 here, 300 there, all engineered to slide just under the automated bank alerts. It totals nearly $5,000. I never noticed. He raised his tired eyes to meet mine. She told me she had personally saved $80,000 to launch this gallery. She told me you two were completely estranged because you had been incredibly cruel to her during her divorce. She said her ex-husband was abusive and that she fled the marriage with nothing. Every single word was a fabrication. I pushed the folder of evidence across the table, bank records, forged commercial guarantees, and the cold, hard data tracking her pattern. His face went from pale to flushed, then back to pale as the sheer scale of the deception sank in. "There's something else," Ethan said slowly, a cold realization dawning on him. Something that never made sense. "The vendors told me you guaranteed the payments, but Chloe told me you had insisted on paying for it. She said it was your way of apologizing for abandoning her during her darkest moments. She told me you felt immense guilt over your career success and wanted to make amends." I shook my head. "I never offered. She put my name on those binding contracts without my knowledge because her credit was completely shot, and she needed a guarantor who could pass a background check." Ethan buried his face in his hands. "Who is this person?" When he looked up, a much more disturbing thought seemed to strike him. "There's one more thing I have to ask. Chloe told me there was a family inheritance coming down, a $300,000 estate left by your maternal grandmother. She said it was clearing probate right after the launch, and that you were both getting a share. She used that supposed inheritance to convince me to sign off on a $100,000 initial business loan for the gallery. I already wired the capital into the corporate account." I stared at him, the utter audacity of the lie taking my breath away. "Our grandmother passed away 15 years ago, Ethan. She left absolutely nothing behind because she lived on a fixed income in a rented apartment. There is no inheritance. There never was." The remaining color drained entirely from Ethan's face. "I poured $100,000 of actual capital into a business built on a ghost story. That night, I brought David, Ethan, Daniel, and Olivia together on a secure conference call. 3 victims of the exact same woman, finally comparing notes. David had the divorce records and the custody filings. Ethan had the text messages detailing the fake inheritance and the corporate wire receipts. I had the concrete evidence of theft and vendor fraud. Pieced together, it formed an undeniable multi-year pattern of systemic financial exploitation." Daniel's assessment was clinical. "This is no longer a civil dispute between family members. This is an ongoing criminal enterprise. A federal prosecutor is going to look at this very closely. We have multiple victims, an extensive paper trail, and clear criminal intent. Furthermore, looking at her current social media activity, she is actively digging her own legal grave." I frowned. "What social media activity?" Olivia passed her phone across the table to me. Ethan had just texted over a screenshot of Chloe's public Instagram page, posted less than 2 hours prior. The photo featured my sister looking heartbroken but resilient. Her eyes were tearful, but the lighting was perfectly curated. The caption made my blood run cold. "Some people will stop at nothing to tear down your happiness." My own older sister, driven by pure jealousy, destroyed my business launch, alienated my fiancé, and tried to erase my future. But I will not be silenced. The truth will come to light. #family betrayal. #toxic sister. #justice for Chloe. The comments were already multiplying by the hundreds. Strangers were rallying to her side. "Stay strong, queen. Blood doesn't make you family. Your sister sounds like a literal sociopath." Chloe hadn't waited for my 72-hour deadline to expire. She had launched a preemptive strike in the court of public opinion. She was styling herself as the victim before anyone else could speak the truth. The battle lines were drawn, and I had been cast as the villain in a script I didn't even know was being written. Tuesday morning arrived with a heavy sense of finality. My 72-hour ultimatum had officially lapsed. Not a single dollar had been returned, no phone calls had been made, and there was absolutely no acknowledgement of accountability. Instead, her social media campaign had gathered massive momentum overnight. The hashtag she created was trending locally in Seattle. Hundreds of complete strangers were calling me a monster based entirely on her beautifully constructed fiction. At 8 a.m., I sat in Daniel's office, signing my name onto the formal legal complaints. The criminal counts were severe: grand larceny, wire fraud, and unauthorized access to a financial account. The civil suit demanded full restitution alongside punitive damages. The documents felt incredibly heavy in my hands, far heavier than paper had any right to be. I was officially setting a legal machine in motion that could very well end with my own sister behind federal bars. "She isn't going to settle," Daniel observed as I handed him the signed pages. "She's betting that you'll blink first. This social media stunt proves she thinks this is a public relations battle, not a legal one." He took the files and passed them to his clerk. "She has completely miscalculated." By 10:30 a.m., the filings were officially processed in King County Superior Court and Federal Court. Chloe would be served within 24 hours. This family betrayal was now a matter of public record. Standing outside the courthouse, I felt the sheer weight of what I had just initiated. Olivia stood right beside me, a steady, grounding presence. "You did the right thing," she said. I looked out at the busy Seattle streets, watching ordinary citizens rush through their routines, completely unaware that my life had just crossed a point of no return. "Then why do I feel like I just amputated my own arm?" "Because you did," Olivia answered. "But it was necrotic, Claire. It was killing you. Daniel advised me to stay far away from my parents' house and let the legal system handle the rest. But I had other plans. If my family was going to choose a side, I wanted them to see the full picture first. They deserved to know exactly who they were defending." Shortly after 4 p.m., I drove back to my childhood home in Bellevue. The house, with its perfectly manicured lawn, looked exactly as it always had, but everything felt different. There were 3 cars parked in the driveway: my mother's SUV, my father's sedan, Chloe's sports car, and one I recognized from photos, Ethan's Land Rover. Everyone had already assembled, as if they were waiting for something. Perhaps waiting for me. I gripped the folder tightly, packed with evidence, and walked toward the entrance. Olivia had offered to come inside with me, but I asked her to wait in the car. This was a family matter, the kind of ugly confrontation that needed to happen behind closed doors. I didn't bother knocking. Technically, this was still the house where I grew up. I pushed the door open and walked right in. The living room looked like a wartime cabinet meeting. My mother sat on the sofa, arms tightly crossed, her expression rigid with a volatile mixture of anger and stress. My father occupied his usual recliner, looking as though he wanted to sink into the cushions and disappear. Chloe was perched on an armchair, looking like an injured queen receiving sympathizers. Ethan stood off by the window, maintaining his distance from everyone, his expression unreadable. In the corner, Leo was quietly coloring, completely oblivious to the tension crackling in the room. The moment I stepped inside, a dead silence fell over the space. Every single eye snapped to me. My mother was the first to speak. "I hope you're here to apologize." I dropped the heavy folder directly onto the coffee table. "I'm here to lay out the truth. What you choose to do with it is up to you." Before anyone could interrupt, I flipped the folder open, spreading the contents across the table. Bank statements, wire records, and vendor contracts. I walked them through the evidence, keeping my voice level and entirely focused on the facts. Chloe systematically drained $115,000 from my savings account. 3 massive transfers executed within a single week. Premeditated and deliberate. I pointed to the contracts. Textually told every single venue manager that I had offered to fund the entire launch. She called me her angel investor and forged my signature to make me the primary guarantor. Chloe bolted upright from her chair. "You never loved me," her voice cracked with rage. "You've always been jealous of me, always. Mom and Dad paid for everything for you. Your college tuition, your car, your apartment deposit." A short, bitter laugh escaped my throat. "They covered my state school tuition while you went to the most expensive private design school. You got the European art tours, and you had every lavish birthday party I was denied. And I paid them back, Chloe. I returned every single dollar. What about you?" The ensuing silence was deafening. Chloe's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. My mother looked at my father, who kept his eyes glued to the floor. I pulled out David's files next. This isn't an isolated incident. I spread out the divorce records and custody agreements, exposing the long-standing history of financial exploitation. She ran the exact same play on her first husband, $40,000. And when he questioned her, she turned it around, accusing him of financial control. He lost his reputation, his credit, and shared custody of Leo, all because he asked where their money went. Suddenly, my father stood up, his face flushed a deep red. "Enough! Stop it!" Everyone froze. In 40 years, my father had never raised his voice. But right now, he was shouting. "Chloe, I'm done. I cannot cover for you anymore." Chloe's face turned stark white. "Dad, what are you talking about?" 3 years ago, My father's voice trembled with a heavy weight. You claimed you needed $50,000 as a critical business loan. I drew that money straight from my retirement account and handed it to you, because you claimed you would lose everything, that you'd end up on the street, and that I'd never see Leo again if I didn't help. And you have never returned a single cent. My mother's shift was instantaneous. The fury on her face redirected like a heat-seeking missile. Richard, what are you saying? You took $50,000 from our retirement account without telling me? My father shrank under her gaze. She begged me, Diane. She said she'd be homeless. She said I'd never see my grandson again. He suddenly looked 10 years older, completely broken. That money was meant for our future. I know. I just didn't know how to tell you. My mother turned her gaze back to Chloe, and for the first time in my life, I saw something shift in her eyes. The automatic defense, the protective reflex for her favored child, fractured. She was finally seeing what I had been looking at for years. Ethan stepped away from the window. His voice was flat, devoid of any warmth. Chloe, we're over. Chloe snapped her head toward him. Ethan, sweetie, please don't listen to them. I've already reviewed the records, Ethan said. All of them. The lies about your grandmother's fake inheritance, the forged corporate guarantees, and the funds you took from my accounts. Not to mention the financial liabilities you opened under my firm's name. He shook his head in disgust. There is no business partnership, and there is definitely no wedding. I am legally dissolving all investment contracts connected to your gallery, and my attorneys are already processing the paperwork. You will be receiving formal legal notices regarding the $100,000 you fraudulently extracted. Chloe's mask shattered entirely. You can't do this. We were supposed to get married. We were supposed to build a business empire together. Ethan walked directly toward the door. I was supposed to marry a partner, not a serial fraudster. He paused briefly next to me on his way out. I'm incredibly sorry I believed her fabrications about you, Claire. Whatever testimony you need from me in court, I will be there. Then he walked out, the front door closing behind him with a heavy, final sound. Amidst all of it, the shouting, the accusations, and the absolute collapse of alliances, a small voice cut through the room. Mommy? Everyone froze. Leo stood at the edge of the room, his coloring book forgotten, tears streaming down his face. Mommy, why is everyone screaming? Did I do something wrong? Is it because the grand opening didn't happen? I'm sorry the party was ruined. Please stop fighting. I dropped to my knees, bringing myself to eye level with him, my heart breaking for the boy. Sweetie, this is not your fault. None of this is. The adults are just trying to figure some things out. You didn't do anything wrong, okay? Absolutely nothing. As Chloe watched me comforting her son, a flicker of an expression crossed her face. Perhaps it was shame, or perhaps a sudden realization of what she had become. But it vanished just as quickly as it appeared. Fine, Chloe said, straightening her posture and aggressively wiping away her tears. Her voice turned to pure ice. If you all want to believe I'm the villain here, fine, but I am not going down alone. She turned her cold, hard gaze onto me. You are going to regret this, Claire. I will make absolutely sure everyone knows who you really are. Your precious career, your spotless reputation. I know about that downtown commercial complex project. I know what almost happened, and I have the internal emails to prove it. She grabbed Leo's hand roughly. We're leaving. Leo resisted slightly, but Chloe's grip was unyielding. The front door slammed shut behind them. Chloe's threat hung in the air like toxic exhaust. That commercial complex project, my single professional vulnerability, the crisis I had confided in her during a weak moment, trusting my sister with my deepest professional anxieties. And now, she was claiming to possess emails. Forged, altered, it wouldn't even matter. In the hands of the wrong people, bias always overrides the facts. The war had just gone completely nuclear. On Wednesday morning, I was jolted awake by the relentless buzzing of my phone on the nightstand. Notifications were flooding the screen faster than I could read them. Instagram tags, Facebook mentions, text messages from unknown numbers. Olivia was already in my living room, her face illuminated by the blue glow of her laptop. You need to see this, she said grimly. A massive, beautifully manicured public post by Chloe had been shared thousands of times overnight. The attached photo showed her looking completely broken but beautiful, tear-stained tracks on her cheeks, the picture-perfect image of a victim. The caption was a masterclass in emotional manipulation. My own older sister didn't just ruin my business launch and alienate my fiancé. Now she's trying to send me to prison on fabricated charges. All because I turned to her for help during my darkest hour. Some people simply cannot bear to see others happy. I refuse to be silenced. #toxic-sister. #family betrayal. #justice for Chloe. The comment section had turned into a digital lynch mob. Hundreds of strangers were expressing absolute outrage on Chloe's behalf. "This is disgusting. How can anyone have a snake for a sister? A complete stain on the professional community. I hope she loses her job." The narrative had been set, and I was firmly established as the villain. Chloe's story grew more elaborate with every subsequent update. In her version of events, I had always been intensely envious of her looks and social life. I had promised to fund her venture, only to maliciously pull the rug out at the very last second. I had brainwashed Ethan with fabrications to turn him against her, and now I was using severe legal intimidation to silence a survivor of domestic hardship. Every statement was more ridiculous than the last, and every statement was being swallowed whole by people who had never met either of us. The most insidious post dropped a vague, ominous hint about my professional life. Certain individuals in urban planning shouldn't be trusted anywhere near public safety projects. That's all I'll say for now. #ask her about the commercial complex. Zero details, but it was just enough to plant a seed of doubt, enough to make my colleagues at the firm wonder what kind of catastrophic professional malpractice I was covering up. The personal messages began hitting around 9 a.m. Texts from acquaintances who had seen Chloe's posts. "Did you really destroy her career? I thought you two were close." Calls from actual friends checking in out of genuine concern. And then, messages from complete strangers who had somehow tracked down my info. "You are a toxic person. Karma is coming for you." I scrolled through the comments, looking for familiar names, trying to gauge the perimeter of the damage. Then I saw a name that made my stomach hit the floor. Sarah Jennings. We had been friends in college. 2 years ago, when she was struggling to find work after graduation, I had written her a glowing internal recommendation, helping her land an excellent position at a municipal planning agency. She owed me nothing, but I had genuinely believed we were friends. Her public comment read, "I always knew Claire was cold-blooded, completely calculating and fake. This doesn't surprise me at all." A woman I had actively supported, someone I had trusted and professionally vouched for, was now publicly labeling me a monster. The betrayal of strangers was easy to ignore, but Sarah's comment cut far deeper than any of Chloe's carefully crafted posts. At 11 a.m., my work phone rang. It was my supervisor, Simon. "Claire, I've received some unsettling information regarding your work here. An anonymous email was sent directly to HR, accusing you of severe professional misconduct during that commercial complex project. It claims you actively suppressed safety data. Personally, I don't believe a word of it, but I have to ask. Is there anything I should know?" I laid out the entire situation clearly, the minor calculation error from 3 years ago, my immediate reporting of the anomaly, the subsequent clean internal audit, and the formal clearance letter issued by the firm back then. Simon listened without interruption. "All right," he said finally. "I trust your record. I'll handle the HR inquiry on this end. Just keep me updated. This has the potential to get incredibly messy." Olivia spent the entire morning monitoring Chloe's digital footprints. "Don't engage," she advised firmly. "Don't feed into it. Let her dig her own grave. Every single update she publishes is fresh evidence of targeted harassment and defamation. Daniel is going to use all of it." But watching Chloe poison the well, seeing complete strangers believe the worst about me, and watching my professional reputation fracture in real time was far more painful than I had anticipated. "She's trying to completely dismantle my standing before I can take her to court," I said. "Then we accelerate our timeline," Olivia replied. Early that afternoon, Ethan called, his voice tight with controlled fury. "We have an issue. Chloe is telling mutual contacts that I was her accomplice. She's claiming I helped her collapse the launch to embezzle her corporate assets. She's even implying that we're having a secret affair and orchestrated the entire drama to run off together. My business partners are interrogating me, and 2 major investment clients just pulled out of our scheduled meetings." The new narrative was far more destructive than the initial lies. Chloe was transforming Ethan and me into co-conspirators and secret lovers who planned her public humiliation for personal gain. Neither claim had an ounce of basis in reality, but in the court of public opinion, facts matter far less than volume. And Chloe was shouting her version to anyone who would listen. Ethan's tech consulting firm relied entirely on executive trust. Because I refused to marry her, she's actively trying to destroy my livelihood, he said. I am filing a formal defamation lawsuit immediately. My legal counsel wants to consolidate our cases to establish a pattern of malicious intent. Do it, I told him. The more documentation we have, the better. Later that day, an email from an unexpected sender dropped into my inbox. It was from a woman named Emily Chang. The subject line read, I used to work with Chloe. You need to know what she did. Emily had worked with Chloe at an art gallery 4 years ago. They had been close friends, or so Emily had believed. I trusted her completely, she wrote. She had regular access to my desk, my workspace, and my personal belongings. Within 3 months, $3,000 vanished from my personal checking account. When Emily confronted Chloe, the familiar pattern emerged. The tears, the deep apologies, and the absolute promise to return every single dollar. Chloe claimed she was desperate, that her divorce was grueling, and that she was a struggling mother with a child to feed. Empathetic and exhausted, Emily agreed to settle the matter privately. No authorities were involved. They simply signed a private repayment agreement. She never paid back a single dime, Emily wrote. Not 1 cent. And when I threatened to take legal action, she turned the narrative around, accusing me of workplace harassment and targeting a single mother. I just gave up. I was too drained to fight her. I just wanted it to be over. Emily had preserved the signed agreement, the bank statements, and the text history where Chloe explicitly admitted to taking the funds. I've been following your legal dispute online, she concluded. I saw her public statements. She ran the exact same play on me. Word for word, I am entirely willing to testify. I have the paper trail. I've been waiting years for someone to finally stop her. Daniel reviewed Emily's documentation later that evening. That brings us to 4 independent victims, he said, arranging the folders across the conference table. You, David, Ethan, and Emily, every single one backed by a paper trail, every single one subjected to the exact same methodology. He looked up at me, a sharp glint of professional satisfaction in his eyes. This is no longer a simple dispute over missing funds. This is a documented history of serial financial exploitation. Laid out on paper, the pattern possessed a chilling clarity. Step 1. Establish an intense emotional connection to secure trust. Step 2. Gain financial access via shared accounts, authorized status, or simple proximity. Step 3. Extract funds either systematically or in massive sums. Step 4. When caught, deploy tears, blame, and severe counter-accusations. Step 5. Rewrite history to cast herself as the ultimate victim. Then, locate the next target and repeat. A federal prosecutor is going to look at this very closely, Daniel stated. Multiple independent victims, a documented methodology, and undeniable intent. Combined with her online harassment campaign, she is literally building her own cell. Every single post, every fabrication, and every allegation is another piece of state's evidence. Just before 6 p.m., Daniel's phone rang. After a brief clinical conversation, he turned back to me. That was opposing counsel, Chloe's representative. She wants to discuss a settlement structure. Chloe's terms were entirely predictable. She offered to return $50,000, less than half of what she took, structured over a 5-year payment plan. In exchange, I would drop all legal actions and sign a strict non-disclosure agreement. I would be legally barred from ever speaking about the matter publicly. No deal, I said without a single second of hesitation. She stole $115,000. She offers a fraction of it over 5 years and expects me to sign a gag order after publicly defaming me for an entire week? Absolutely not. We go to court. Late that night, long after Daniel had gone home and Olivia had finally drifted off to sleep, my phone vibrated with an incoming text from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but a sudden instinct made me look. The message contained an image attachment. It was a digital screenshot of a heavily altered email, supposedly sent by me to my supervisor 3 years ago. The subject line read, "Regarding structural complex code anomalies." But the body of the text had been deliberately manipulated, words had been added, and context had been warped. It was engineered to make it look like I was actively attempting to conceal a major public safety hazard rather than reporting it. Below the image, a single message followed. "Drop all legal actions, or this goes to your entire firm, the Architecture Licensing Board, and the local news outlets. You have 48 hours." It was signed with a single letter. C. I stared at the glowing screen. The email was a complete fabrication. I knew it, and my firm knew it. But anyone else receiving it wouldn't know that instantly. And in the time it would take to legally verify the forgery, my professional standing could be completely demolished. Olivia appeared at the kitchen doorway. What is it? I turned the screen toward her. She's done negotiating, Olivia said, her voice dropping to a cold, clinical tone. She's opting for mutually assured destruction. The federal courthouse in downtown Seattle loomed against a heavy gray Monday sky, its massive stone facade looking imposing and final. At 8:15 a.m., I arrived alongside Daniel and Olivia, navigating past a small cluster of local media vans. The dispute had caught the attention of regional outlets. The narrative of an influencer sister draining an architect's life savings made for a highly viral headline. The rapid click of camera shutters echoed as we climbed the courthouse steps. I kept my gaze fixed straight ahead, my expression neutral, my heart hammering against my ribs. Daniel had met with Chloe's legal representative at 7 a.m. to review the parameters of the expected plea arrangement. Now, in the corridor outside the courtroom, his expression was incredibly grim. She rejected the terms. She shifted her strategy this morning. We are going to trial. She claims she possesses new documentation that will entirely clear her of the charges. I wasn't surprised. Deeply disappointed, but not surprised. Chloe always had another angle to play. What kind of documentation? Daniel shook his head. Opposing counsel refused to disclose the specifics, but it doesn't alter our standing. The paper trail we have is insurmountable. Whatever she's planning, it won't hold up under scrutiny. Then let's finish this. Courtroom 4B was far more compact than I had envisioned. Dark wood paneling, soaring ceilings, and the American flag hanging heavily behind the judicial bench. The spectator gallery was completely packed. Journalists with digital notepads sat alongside curious onlookers drawn in by the viral coverage, interspersed with faces I knew all too well. Olivia sat in the front row directly behind the prosecution table. Ethan was seated nearby, mentally preparing to take the stand. David was there too, waiting for his first real day of vindication after 3 years of being branded a financial abuser. Emily Chang sat nervously gripping her purse, but her posture remained entirely firm. And in the very back row, separated by an invisible wall of immense tension, sat my parents. They were physically seated next to each other, but the fracture between them was completely visible even from across the courtroom. Chloe sat at the defense table next to her attorney. I hadn't seen her since she stormed out of my parents' house with Leo. She looked noticeably haggard, thinner, paler, her usual vibrant confidence replaced by a hollow look. Yet she was meticulously styled in a soft, pale pink blouse and modest jewelry, the flawless picture of a wronged, vulnerable woman. Performance mode, her final stage production. All rise, the bailiff's voice cut through the quiet murmurs of the gallery. The Honorable Judge Patricia Lawson presiding. Judge Lawson entered with a deliberate, commanding stride. She was a woman in her late 60s with silver-streaked hair and reading glasses perched firmly on her nose. She possessed a well-known reputation for running an incredibly efficient courtroom and tolerating absolutely zero legal theater. Settling into her bench, she scanned the room with a pair of sharp, uncompromising eyes. The prosecution may deliver its opening statement. Daniel rose calmly, stepping toward the center of the well. Your Honor, this matter centers on a systematic campaign of grand larceny, wire fraud, and profound familial exploitation. The defendant, Chloe Linden, deliberately extracted $115,000 from her own sister's account. She forged binding corporate documents, defrauded commercial businesses, and when discovered, attempted to deploy fabricated records as extortion. This was not a desperate act born of a sudden crisis. It was a highly organized operation executed over several weeks. The evidence will demonstrate a multi-year methodology of financial manipulation targeting multiple independent victims. We ask the court to hold the defendant fully accountable under the law. The defense attorney rose next, delivering his statement with an experienced, polished smoothness. Your Honor, my client is not a criminal enterprise. She is the product of a highly dysfunctional family dynamic. For years, Claire Linden maintained absolute financial control over family affairs. She explicitly promised to fund her younger sister's career launch, only to maliciously withdraw that backing at the absolute last second to punish a perceived slight. My client's actions were born of profound distress, yes, but they were rooted in betrayal, not greed. The prosecution will present cold numbers and digital logs. We will present context and human reality. My client made errors in judgment, but she is entirely distinct from the malicious predator they are attempting to portray. Listening to the defense's version of reality, I felt that familiar, heavy sensation of history being actively rewritten in Chloe's orbit. I was the controlling antagonist, the punisher, the villain. It was the exact same narrative she had spun to dismantle David and to anyone who had ever tried to enforce a boundary. The prosecution called its very first witness, Thomas Reed, a senior fraud investigator from the Boeing Employees Credit Union. He took the stand carrying a thick ledger of verified banking data. With methodical precision, he guided the court through the transaction records. 3 massive withdrawals within a single week, $40,000, $45,000, and $30,000. Completely unauthorized and traced directly to an account held solely by Chloe Linden. We also conducted a forensic audit of the network access logs, Reed continued. The defendant attempted to gain entry to Claire Linden's savings portal 5 separate times over the 2 months preceding the successful transfers. The first 4 attempts were blocked due to incorrect credentials. She only bypassed security on the 5th. This was not an impulsive transaction. This was a systematic probing of the account's security parameters. The defense attorney stepped forward for cross-examination. Mr. Reed, was Chloe Linden not explicitly listed as an authorized user on that specific account? Reed nodded neutrally. She was designated for emergency access privileges. However, that authorization carried clear system limitations. It did not constitute a legal right to liquidate the entire asset pool. The defense attorney pushed harder, but she had authorized access. Mr. Reed's response was quiet and completely devastating. Access is not the same as authorization. I have physical access to the bank vault, but that doesn't grant me the legal right to take the assets inside. The prosecution's next witness was Dr. Sarah Chen, an expert in digital forensics and document verification. She presented her analysis of the guarantor signatures on the vendor agreements. The signatures attributed to Claire Linden do not match her verified samples, Dr. Chen explained, pointing to the magnified images displayed on the courtroom screens. The stroke patterns, pressure points, and letter formations all indicate manual forgery. She then turned her attention to another exhibit. Furthermore, the digital email evidence submitted by the defense alleging professional misconduct shows definitive signs of digital manipulation. The metadata timestamps conflict directly with the network server records, and the formatting is entirely inconsistent with the employer's internal mail server. The document is an outright fabrication. I looked over at Chloe. As the forged email, her primary weapon of extortion, was formally exposed as an additional crime, her composure flickered for a fraction of a second before hardening right back into an image of wronged innocence. David took the stand next. He had waited 3 long years for this exact moment. 3 years of being dismissed as a bitter ex-husband making malicious accusations. Despite the visible emotion in his eyes, his voice remained completely steady. I was married to Chloe for 3 years, he testified. During that time, $40,000 was systematically drained from our accounts without my knowledge. When I discovered the losses and confronted her, she turned the narrative around, accusing me of financial control. I lost my reputation, my credit, my business, and primary custody of my son. He looked directly at Chloe. All because I asked where our money went. Daniel guided him through the specifics. And how did the court view your claims regarding the missing funds at the time? David's jaw tightened. They didn't believe me. Chloe wept on the stand, claiming I was deeply controlling and that she was terrified of me. The judge saw a vulnerable woman and a clinical man making financial accusations. I had the bank statements, but she had the tears. The tears won. Emily Chang took the stand next, her hands trembling slightly, but her voice completely clear. She described working alongside Chloe, trusting her, and subsequently discovering $3,000 missing from her account. When I confronted her, she broke down, promising to repay every dime. She signed a private repayment agreement, but she never honored it, and when I pressured her for the funds, she accused me of workplace harassment. I simply gave up. I was too emotionally drained to fight her. 4 separate victims. The exact same methodology, the exact same manipulation, the exact same outcome. As the pattern emerged with undeniable clarity, Judge Lawson's expression grew increasingly grave. Then, Chloe took the stand in her own defense. Her attorney carefully guided her through a beautifully rehearsed narrative. Claire was always the successful, favored child, Chloe sobbed on cue. I struggled my entire life while everything was handed to her. When I tried to build a career of my own, I turned to her for help. She explicitly promised to back me, only to maliciously withdraw her support at the absolute last second out of pure spite. I am not a thief. I am a mother who made a desperate choice in a moment of distress. I fully intended to return the funds as soon as I secured investors. She never gave me a chance. She went straight to the authorities, my own sister. Daniel stepped forward for the cross-examination. I watched my sister brace herself for the performance of her life. Ms. Linden, you testified that you fully intended to return your sister's funds. With what assets? You currently carry $40,000 in personal credit card debt. Chloe hesitated. I would have found a way. You also told your fiancé that you possessed $80,000 in personal savings. Was that statement accurate? That was a misunderstanding. And what about the $200,000 inheritance from your maternal grandmother? The estate you used to convince him to sign a $100,000 commercial investment contract. Chloe's face drained of color. I don't know what you're talking about. Your grandmother passed away 15 years ago, leaving zero assets. You fabricated a fictional inheritance to manipulate your fiancé into capital funding your venture. The defense attorney objected, but Judge Lawson overruled it immediately. The witness will answer the question. Chloe's composure fractured completely. I was just trying to build a life. Everyone else gets support. Why shouldn't I? Claire has everything, the career, the savings, the future. I had nothing. I deserved that money. The courtroom fell into an absolute stunned silence. Chloe realized what she had spoken, but it was far too late. It wasn't borrowed, and it wasn't a crisis. She said, deserved. Her deep-seated narcissism and sense of entitlement were laid entirely bare for the court to see. Daniel delivered the final blow. Ms. Linden, our records show that 2 weeks prior to your first successful withdrawal, you conducted online searches for how to access another person's bank account without triggering alerts. He displayed the search history on the courtroom projector. Does that indicate a sudden crisis or deliberate premeditation? Chloe stared at the screen. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The tears were gone. The performance was over. It was just a woman watching her final lie turn to ash. The witness may step down, Judge Lawson said, her tone entirely even, though her eyes were sharp. The court will recess for deliberation. We will reconvene tomorrow morning for the verdict. As Chloe walked past me on her way out of the courtroom, our eyes met. Her expression carried no hatred, no rage. It was just an absolute recognition of reality. She knew it was over. She had always known that eventually someone would stop her. She just never believed it would actually be me. Tuesday morning carried the collective weight of every event that had led to this moment. I sat in the exact same courtroom, on the exact same wooden bench, but the entire atmosphere had shifted overnight. The gallery was even more packed than the day before. Word had spread, and journalists sat with their digital notepads ready while members of the community gathered to see the conclusion of the story. I had barely slept. Every single scenario had played on a loop in my mind. What if the court showed leniency? What if she somehow evaded accountability? What if the sacrifices I made and the bridges I burned were all for nothing? Olivia sat right beside me, placing a steadying hand on my arm. No matter what happens, she whispered, you did the right thing. I wanted to believe her. Chloe sat at the defense table, completely motionless, staring blankly into space. There was no performance today, no carefully chosen outfit designed to project vulnerable innocence, just a hollow look. She looked like someone who already knew an inescapable judgment was coming. All rise, the bailiff's voice boomed through the chamber. Judge Patricia Lawson entered with her usual commanding authority, holding a single folder. Her face remained entirely unreadable. Please be seated, I am prepared to read my verdict. The room collectively held its breath. This court has thoroughly reviewed all evidence, testimony, and documentation submitted in this matter, Judge Lawson stated, her voice carrying absolute weight. The defendant, Chloe Marie Linden, stands accused of grand larceny, wire fraud, and unauthorized access to a financial account. Furthermore, evidence of attempted extortion has been entered into the record. She paused, looking directly down at Chloe. The evidence is insurmountable and entirely unambiguous. The defendant systematically extracted $115,000 from her sister via unauthorized transfers. She forged legal documents to defraud commercial vendors. She fabricated an estate inheritance to manipulate her fiancé into signing investment contracts. And when confronted with the reality of her actions, she attempted to extort the victim using falsified records. This was not an isolated error born of distress. This was a documented predatory pattern of financial exploitation spanning multiple years and targeting multiple independent victims. Another heavy pause fell over the room. On the charge of grand larceny, this court finds the defendant guilty. On the charge of wire fraud, guilty. On the charge of forgery, guilty. On the charge of unauthorized access, guilty. On the charge of attempted extortion, guilty. Each word landed with the heavy strike of a gavel. I watched Chloe flinch with every single count, 5 times. Her shoulders collapsed completely, her head dropping forward as her hair fell to obscure her face. A sound escaped her, a raw, broken gasp. It wasn't the dramatic sobbing she had deployed so many times before. It was the sound of a person watching her entire world collapse. The defense attorney immediately stood up. "Your Honor, we formally request leniency. My client is a single mother with a young son who relies on her care. She has no prior criminal record. This is a first offense. We ask the court to consider probation and community service in lieu of carceral time." Judge Lawson removed her reading glasses, looking down at Chloe with zero sympathy. "Ms. Linden, please stand." Chloe rose, her legs visibly trembling. "Your attorney referenced your lack of a prior record. Technically, that is accurate." The judge's voice turned incredibly stern. "However, the evidence demonstrates that this is merely the first time you are being held legally accountable for your actions. We have heard from at least 4 separate individuals whose lives you have deeply disrupted. This extensive pattern suggests there may be others. Throughout these proceedings, you have shown zero genuine remorse. Your only true regret is that you were caught. Your son deserves far better than the example you are currently setting." Chloe's absolute defense shattered completely. Tears began streaming down her face, but these were entirely different from the calculated tears she had weaponized so many times before. These were authentic. "Given the severity and the ongoing pattern of these actions," the judge continued, "I sentence you to the following. Due to the federal wire fraud elements combined with your lack of a formal record, you are sentenced to 3 years of strictly monitored federal probation. You are ordered to make full financial restitution to Claire Linden in the amount of $115,000. Furthermore, per the outcome of the civil filings, you will make additional restitution payments to Ethan Blake, David, and Emily Chang. You will complete 500 hours of community service within the next 18 months. You are ordered to undergo mandatory financial literacy and ethics counseling. Any single violation of this probation will result in immediate detention for a period of up to 5 years." She leaned forward slightly over her bench. "Furthermore, the defendant will carry a permanent federal felony record. This will impact her employment, housing, and professional opportunities for the rest of her life. These are the natural legal consequences of the choices she made. Ms. Linden, if you appear in my courtroom again for any reason, I will show absolutely zero leniency. You are being given an opportunity to honestly rebuild your life. I suggest you take it seriously." Chloe nodded, a minute trembling motion. Her tears continued to fall in total silence. There were no words left. What could she possibly say? "Court is adjourned." The heavy strike of the gavel echoed through the chamber, carrying an absolute sound of finality. It was over. I sat completely motionless as reality finally settled deep into my bones. Daniel placed a supportive hand on my shoulder. "You did it," he said softly. But I didn't feel a massive wave of triumph. What I felt was complete exhaustion. Years of fighting, years of being overlooked, minimized, and treated as a financial resource instead of a human being had finally been acknowledged and verified. The legal system looked at the hard data and declared what I had always known to be true. I was not the villain in this story. Olivia wiped away her own tears and pulled me into a fierce, tight hug from behind. In the back row of the gallery, David stood with tears streaming openly down his face. For 3 years, he had been branded a liar and a monster. Today, his name was completely cleared. Emily Chang nodded quietly to herself, gripping her purse, finally finding a sense of closure for an injustice she had carried alone for 4 years. Ethan slipped out into the corridor silently, his own process of healing just beginning. I glanced toward the rear of the courtroom where my parents sat completely rigid. My mother was weeping openly, but I understood now that her tears weren't for Chloe. They were for the absolute fracture of the family dynamic, for the daughter she had profoundly failed, and for decades of choices she could never undo. My father stared blankly at the floor, his shoulders completely hunched under the weight of every single moment he chose comfortable silence over courage. They didn't walk toward Chloe, and they didn't walk toward me. They just sat there, two people who had completely run out of ways to evade the truth. As Chloe was being escorted out to sign her formal probation and restitution paperwork, she passed directly by my table. She paused for a split second, refusing to turn her head. "I hope you're satisfied." The words were nothing more than a faint whisper. Then she kept walking. I said absolutely nothing. There was nothing left to say. 2 weeks later, Daniel called with an update on the recovery process. Chloe's personal assets had been legally frozen and liquidated. The sports car my father had purchased for her was sold, with the proceeds directed straight into the restitution fund. Her bank accounts were garnished. The very first payment hit my account that afternoon, $8,500 raised from selling off her designer bags and jewelry. It should have felt like a massive victory, but instead it felt like collecting installments on a wound that would never fully heal. Full restitution will take several years, Daniel explained clinically. Potentially a decade. She will be making monthly payments for a very long time. Her wages will be garnished, and her tax refunds will be intercepted. She will be paying for this throughout her entire working life. $115,000. That was the price my sister had placed on our entire relationship. Actually, it was far less than that. She simply never anticipated that I would choose to fight back. On a Saturday afternoon, exactly 2 weeks after the sentencing, a knock came at my apartment door. My parents stood on the threshold, looking incredibly tense and uncertain, standing on the edge of a relationship they had damaged far too deeply for an easy fix. Without a word, I stepped aside and let them enter. "We should have stopped this a long time ago." My mother's voice was quieter than I had ever heard it. "I created this dynamic, Claire. I taught Chloe that the rules didn't apply to her, and I taught you that your only job was to silently absorb the consequences. Neither of those choices was love, it was damage." My father spoke next, every single word visibly difficult for him. "I was supposed to protect you, both of you. I allowed this pattern to continue because confronting it was difficult, and staying silent was easy. That was cowardice. And you paid the price for it." I looked at the two people who raised me, flawed, imperfect, ordinary human beings who had somehow shaped the lives of Chloe and me. "I don't know if I can offer forgiveness right now," I told them honestly. "Not yet, maybe never fully. But I can work toward understanding you. Let's start there." 3 months later, I stood outside a beautiful brick loft in the Ballard neighborhood, watching my real estate agent unlock the heavy front door. This wasn't the original space I had saved to purchase. That specific dream had been taken, shattered, and ultimately rebuilt into something entirely different. This property was slightly smaller, a bit older, and purchased entirely with capital I had independently reaccumulated after the trial, not relying on the slow monthly drip of Chloe's garnished wages. "Ready to see the inside?" the agent asked with a smile. I took the keys from her hand and stepped across the threshold. This was my space, the new headquarters for Linden Architecture and Urban Planning. My fresh beginning, built entirely on my own strength rather than recovered losses. As I stood in the empty ground floor studio area, my phone buzzed with an incoming text from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but a sudden instinct made me look. "Congratulations on the studio space. You earned it, I mean that." It was signed with a single letter, C. I stared at the screen for a long time. What did it mean after everything we had been through? Genuine accountability, or the beginning of a brand new manipulation? Perhaps I would never truly know. But standing in a studio paid for by my own hard work, a familiar sensation of absolute freedom washed over me. My peace of mind didn't depend on Chloe's redemption. It never did. I closed the door on that old chapter and stepped completely into the next page. 1 year later, I stood by the large windows of my second-floor living space, watching the snow fall gently over Seattle. December had brought a rare, quiet beauty to the city, dusting the brick walls and settling onto the cast-iron balcony I had dreamed about for so long. Behind me, the espresso machine hummed softly, filling the kitchen with warmth. Modest holiday decorations added a touch of cheer to the room, keeping things simple and making the space feel exactly like a home. My home. A space earned entirely through my own resilience after everything fell apart. I am 35 now, running my own independent architectural firm, and I recently secured a mid-sized urban revitalization project with the city. The mayor's office even sent over a handwritten note. Your integrity under immense pressure and your absolute adherence to structural safety standards have not gone unnoticed. We are thrilled to partner with your team. I framed that letter, not because I needed external validation, but because it served as a permanent reminder that choosing the difficult right over the easy wrong yields results. Good results. Olivia became the primary legal counsel for my firm, and she remains an irreplaceable pillar of support in my life. At my studio's housewarming gathering, she raised her glass to me. You didn't just survive this, Claire. You completely transformed. My advocacy work began almost entirely by accident. A colleague mentioned that the Washington Coalition Against Financial Exploitation was searching for speakers, individuals with actual lived experience who could help others identify early warning signs. I made a single phone call, which turned into a seminar, then another, and eventually became a regular commitment. Now, I spend 2 Saturdays a month helping people understand how they are being manipulated and how to protect their financial future. I recognize the immense guilt they carry. I understand the specific psychological tactics deployed against them, and I know better than most how incredibly difficult it is to take a stand against someone you love. Last month, a letter arrived from Emily Chang. Because of your courage, she wrote, I finally reported what Chloe did to the authorities. She owed taxes on funds she claimed she never received, and an investigation is officially underway. You started a chain reaction, Claire. Thank you for showing strength when I couldn't find my own. A chain reaction. I had never viewed it through that lens before, but perhaps that was the entire point. One person standing up gives everyone else the implicit permission to do the exact same thing. Over the past year, my parents and I have established a completely new dynamic. It isn't a story of perfect forgiveness, but it is one of mutual understanding. We video call once a month now, structured, bounded, and authentic. They respect my space completely. My mother joined a support group for parents dealing with adult behavioral issues. I am finally learning how my choices enabled her behavior, she shared during a recent call. It's deeply painful but completely necessary. My father began regular therapy sessions for the first time at 68. I'm learning to speak my truth instead of hiding behind silence, he said. I can see the genuine effort they are making, and that counts for a lot. David now holds sole custody of Leo. The family court adjusted the arrangement immediately after Chloe's federal conviction made it clear she couldn't provide a stable environment. I still speak with my nephew over video calls every single month. He is 9 now, growing incredibly fast, intensely curious about the world, and his natural resilience gives me immense hope for his future. Last summer, Leo came to stay with me at my new studio in Seattle for an entire week. We spent our days building elaborate city models out of Lego bricks, watching the vendors toss fish at Pike Place Market, and reading together every night before bed. One evening, completely out of nowhere, he looked up at me with those familiar eyes and said, "Auntie Claire, I'm really glad you aren't mad at me." In that exact moment, my heart broke and healed simultaneously. I have never been mad at you, sweetie, I told him, holding him close. Not for a single second, and I never will be. No matter what track Chloe's life takes, Leo will grow up knowing he is completely safe and loved. That boy will not repeat the cycle. I will personally see to it. Chloe's reality has shifted into something entirely unrecognizable from the glamorous, high-end lifestyle she used to project. Carrying a federal felony conviction for wire fraud, she now works the night shift at a regional grocery store chain, earning a basic wage stocking shelves and handling inventory. She lives in a modest, state-subsidized studio apartment. A portion of every single paycheck is automatically deducted for restitution, and she still owes tens of thousands of dollars across the board. Her community service has been fulfilled, but her mandatory counseling continues. A professional therapist has finally given a name to the behavioral patterns our family ignored for decades. A week before Christmas, a card arrived in my mailbox, a plain white envelope with a standard stamp bearing Chloe's return address. Inside, there was no long letter, no grand explanations, and no dramatic pleas for forgiveness. There was just a simple, unembellished holiday card with a short note written in her familiar handwriting. I am completing my hours. I am doing the work. I hope you are well. I sat by the window, holding the card as the snow continued to dust the streets of Seattle. I didn't feel anger, and I didn't feel a desire for revenge. I just felt a quiet, profound peace. The law had done its work, the boundaries had held, and the truth had cleared the air. I set the card down gently on the counter, took a slow sip of my coffee, and looked back out at the snow. The storm had passed, and for the first time in my life, my future was entirely my own to build. Inside, there was a simple holiday card accompanied by a handwritten note. Claire, I don't expect a reply. I know I don't deserve one. Therapy is helping me see things I couldn't see before, or chose not to. I've spent my entire life telling myself a story about you. None of it was true. You weren't the jealous one, you weren't cold, and you weren't the enemy. I was just too terrified to look clearly at myself. I am so sorry, not because I want anything from you, but just because it's the truth. I hope you are happy now. I really mean it. Chloe. I read it 3 times. I didn't call Olivia to dissect it. I didn't try to decode any hidden meanings or anticipate a new angle of manipulation. I just sat quietly holding it. Maybe it was sincere. Maybe Chloe had finally begun the long, agonizing work of understanding what she had done. Maybe not. Time would tell. But sitting in my own kitchen, in my own home, in my own life, I realized a profound truth. My peace of mind didn't depend on her redemption. It never did. Looking back now, I understand the dynamic that shaped us. I had loved my sister so unconditionally that I forgot to demand that she love me back. I gave without boundaries, and I sacrificed without limits. In doing so, I enabled a person to believe she had a right to take everything. Our family enabled her, and I enabled her, until the day I stopped. The most important lesson I learned is this: love without respect is entirely worthless. A family without integrity is nothing more than an accident of biology. And sometimes the most painful choice is also the absolute right choice. I didn't destroy my sister's life. She destroyed it herself. I simply refused to let her destroy mine. If you are listening to this video, perhaps you recognize a part of your own reality in my story. Perhaps there is someone in your life who constantly takes and takes and takes, someone who makes you feel guilty the moment you attempt to set a boundary, someone who labels your self-protection as selfishness and twists every single confrontation into your fault. You do not owe them your peace of mind. You do not owe anyone unconditional sacrifice. Protecting yourself is not selfish. It is survival. And sometimes, survival is the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for the people who truly care about you. What would you do if someone you loved betrayed you in this manner? Would you find the strength to choose justice over guilt? Would you have the courage to choose yourself? Thank you for staying with me through this story. Living through it wasn't easy, and recounting it was just as difficult. But if a single person listening to this recognizes their own situation, if one person finds the courage to establish a boundary, protect their future, and say no more, then every single painful moment was entirely worth it. I would love to hear your thoughts. Please leave a comment and share your own experiences, or simply let me know which city you are watching from. It helps me see how far these messages travel. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button. We have more stories to share, more lessons to learn, and more journeys to walk through together. Until next time, please remember this. You deserve respect, and you have every right to your boundaries. No one, not even family, has the right to steal your peace of mind. My name is Claire. This is my story.